Wait a second. This isn't your grandma's cancer show.
Not your grandma's cancer show.
Hi, I'm Tatum, and today we're diving into the particular duration and endurance involved in having a chronic cancer. We've got three great guests with us today. Christopher is a Shine trustee who was diagnosed at 40. Normally we hear about the rush for treatment, but he was put on watch and wait. And he'll share how he watched and waited for a decade and a half before treatment. Maddie was 18 when she was diagnosed with an ultra-rare cancer, and we often hear about a burst of curative treatment, but Maddie will share what it's like to have years of treatment as well as times of waiting. And Amber, who's with me now, was 21 when she was diagnosed, and no one knows the long-term effects of her treatment since most recipients are 30 to 40 years older than her. Hi, Amber. Welcome.
Hi.
Can you tell me what was going on in your life when you were diagnosed?
I received my cancer diagnosis of chronic myeloid leukemia, which is a type of blood and bone marrow cancer, during my fourth year of university. At the time, I was actually living away from home. So my hometown is in St Andrews in Scotland. And I was at uni for 4 years in the city of Edinburgh, which was, it was amazing to be in Edinburgh. I was living away from home, and I was living in a shared accommodation with 4 others at the time. I was still being investigated by my hospital at home, and the nearest one that had a haematology ward was Dundee, which is around like half an hour, 40 minutes away from St Andrews and an hour and a half away from Edinburgh. I had literally was in the middle of exams when I was told about my diagnosis. So I was in the end of my first term of fourth year, just started my dissertation, and I had ongoing investigations of a lot of kind of blood tests, and then I had a bone marrow biopsy, and that was from September until the start of November when I was diagnosed with CML.
And had you been feeling unwell, and that was why you had been investigated and having these tests?
I had been having quite a few symptoms over the course of a few years. So they're unsure how long I actually had the cancer for. They said it could have been the last 2 years, it could have been the past 5 years. However, there was so many random symptoms, and some of them were very rare symptoms that not many of the GPs knew about at the time. It was kind of like they are a symptom of leukemia. However, they weren't as kind of known as the typical ones. So I suffered, I wouldn't say fatigue, but I'd say I was unusually tired a lot. I had frequent infections, which is quite a common side effect. But living in Scotland, we do get a lot of colds and flus because it's so cold here anyway. So it wasn't too concerning at the time. I bruised quite easily. Again, I wasn't too concerned about that. Then I started getting bleeding gums. Now, I would wake up in the morning looking like someone had punched me in the face, like my whole mouth would be bleeding. I went to my dentist about that. I was under investigations for gum disease. However, I had very good teeth and very good gums. And I was also a very young candidate for gum disease. That was ruled out. And then I also started getting numb, tingling hands. Kind of 6 months before diagnosis, I'd wake up with pins and needles in my hands and my legs. And this is one of the side effects that the GPs aren't too aware of. And sometimes I would be unable to move my hands at all, which was really scary. So I was taken for like an MRI. They couldn't find anything. They thought there was something wrong with my spine or neurologically. But and then eventually leading up to when I was diagnosed with another blood condition called hemochromatosis, which is when your body retains too much iron over a certain amount of time. It doesn't filter it into the blood properly. So I was referred to hematology and was picked up by chance because at the time that I was investigated for hemochromatosis, which is hereditary, so from my parents, they picked up that I had an abnormal amount of white blood cells. And the consultant at the time was my hemochromatosis consultant. And he said, it does typically look like you just have a flu, but I have a feeling that we should keep doing tests. So I was brought in for about 5 blood tests over 3 months, still wasn't going down. They said, we're going to do a bone marrow biopsy. We're testing you for a lot of different like bone conditions. There are some cancers we're testing you for, but given your health, your age, it's highly unlikely that it's going to be a cancer. So in my mind, I didn't think it was ever going to be a cancer. And kind of leading up to the bone marrow biopsy, I actually started to get really sore bone pain to the point that I was on crutches because I couldn't walk with the amount of pain I was in. So my side effects actually were getting worse leading up. So they must have just caught it as it was progressing.
So I'm picturing you at university, and what were you studying?
Business with marketing.
So your head is full of everything at uni. You're in your 4th year and you've got all these health conditions that are being, you've got so much going on in the build-up, and then you get, told it's unlikely to be cancer because of your age, and then you get that news, you're living away from home. How did you begin to process it?
I think this answer is actually used by a lot of people that I've been speaking to, because I also have friends that have gone through cancer diagnosis through multiple trips that I've been on for young people. And at the time, I was told that this was the best cancer you could get. And I think quite a few other people I've heard have been told the same thing for different cancers. And at the time I thought, that's great. If there is, not really knowing what a chronic cancer meant. I wasn't even aware. And I think a lot of people aren't aware that you can even get a chronic cancer. So at the time I thought, that's great. It can be treated with medication. I didn't really know what that medication involves. At the time it was just kind of this adrenaline that was like, right, well, your body goes into fight or flight mode. So you're like, I need to fight this. I need to get through this. You don't really process it. You just want to they were quite keen to bring me in as soon as possible to get started on the medication after I'd finished my exams. So it was quite quick, I'd say.
And when you're telling other people, because often people haven't heard of a chronic cancer until they get it themselves or they know someone. Did you find that other people had an idea of what your treatment was? Did they imagine it to be very different from the reality of your treatment?
I still struggle with this. There is not a great understanding of chronic cancers. And I do totally understand, because before I was diagnosed with one, I had absolutely no clue. And I think it's portrayed in documentaries and on the news. There's not a lot of understanding about chronic cancers. It's kind of more portrayed as terminal cancers, or cancers that you go in for, chemotherapy and radiotherapy in the hospital, and then you're in there for 6 months or a year, you come out. And there's not a lot about chronic cancer. So I do understand why there's not much of an understanding. However, it is extremely difficult for people that do have a chronic cancer diagnosis. I'm currently treated by targeted therapy, which is considered a chemotherapy drug that targets the cancer cells and stops them multiplying. But it also has a lot of toxins in it. So I've been told, it's just like a paracetamol. That's one of my favourite quotes by somebody. They've also kind of said, oh, so like that's fine then, like you don't really have cancer, or there's just not a lot of kind of recognition. It's kind of like a dismissal of what we're going through.
Yeah, that was the word that was in my head when you were saying that. Like, so dismissive. Kind of, if it doesn't fall into those two categories, like you said, that's on the news or on TV shows, then somehow it isn't cancer enough. You were saying that you're doing chemo. Can you tell me a little bit about the side effects of your treatment and how that impacts your life?
When I first started the treatment, my treatment is known to be very severe side effects in the beginning, for the first 6 months to a year. However, it is kind of subject to each person, so it can be different. So some people might get very few side effects. Some people can have severe side effects. Some people can be in the middle. Most people will get pretty bad side effects at the beginning. So when I first started the medication, I was put on a drug called imatinib, which is one of the targeted therapies. And I think there's about 7 now available of these targeted therapies. So I initially was on imatinib. It caused me to be nauseous for like, as soon as I took the tablet, I would suddenly get really nauseous for about 2 hours. And then I would be non-stop vomiting for hours. And this went on every single day. There was like some of my favourite meals that I had eaten and then been sick, and now I can't even look at them again, just because of all of this. And yeah, there were times, this went on for about 6 months, of just constantly being nauseous and vomiting. So after I took my pill, I couldn't really plan anything. And this was at like 6 p.m. So after 6 p.m, it made it very difficult. And a few times I did try to like go out with my friends to see like a play, to like make myself, like enjoy myself whilst being away in the city. I had to be taken out and given a sick bucket because I just suddenly started to feel really sick. So it was really affecting like my social life and my life at uni. I also was on, as I said before, I got really bad bone pains. As the bone marrow is really being kind of compressed, it's very busy in the bone marrow, so it's compressing on my bones, which makes it so sore. It kind of feels like arthritis. And I was on crutches for a while and kind of crying with the pain in bed at night or during the day. Severe headaches and severe allergies, which I still get as well today, which is skin reactions and allergies to the tablet because it's so potent.
And that doesn't sound like any paracetamol I've ever taken. I mean, no. That is horrendous. I mean, that's not what anyone should be dealing with at university. And your attempts, like, let's go out and have a nice meal. Let's go out and watch a play. And, it's feeling sick, but also, like you were saying, you've got that uncertainty of not being able to plan anything as well. And on top of that, what did it do to your energy levels?
Fatigue is one of the most common side effects of all types of cancers and treatments. And unfortunately, I have changed my my targeted therapy to a different one called dasatinib. And it's more potent, but this was because I was struggling with the fatigue and I'd already been on my treatment for a year. They thought it would subside a little, but it still hadn't. So I changed to a new drug. But I still very much struggle with fatigue. It's the one of the side effects I still get today. I still get some side effects. I don't get the vomiting and the nausea, but the fatigue is like a constant battle every day. It's every day I get up and I'm exhausted, and people don't fully get that. I think people think, oh, you're just tired. However, fatigue is more like kind of, no matter how much you sleep, you're always exhausted, but you're exhausted to different levels of exhaustion rather. Yeah.
Yeah, there needs to be like an exhaustion chart that you could like more accurately describe it than, fatigue is kind of vague, but actually, yeah, there are those days where getting out of bed is actually painful and everything's so heavy. And yeah, maybe we should draw up a chart actually, kind of a fatigue where we are on it. You were at university. Were you able to complete your studies, and how did your fatigue impact your life and your opportunities after your degree?
I graduated with a first-class honours degree in business marketing, and I had applied to do the accelerated 2-year LLB law course at the University of Edinburgh, which is a 2-year graduate programme on top of my honours degree to become a solicitor. It's a very competitive course with an acceptance rate of like 10%, I think it is, at Edinburgh. And I got an unconditional offer, so I was absolutely over the moon with that. I was kind of, during university, I was sitting between a 2-1 and a first, and I think during my diagnosis, it kind of fueled me even more to be able. I did have a lot of help from family members and friends, but I was very motivated, and it almost focused me even more to show like I can still do this and I can get the first class is what I was going for, but I would have been very happy with a 2-1. And I just, I managed to find the energy out of somewhere to be able to finish and get the degree that I wanted and to get into my dream course. But unfortunately, after putting so much energy towards like funneling into studies, I wasn't doing anything else. I was just studying all the time. When I finally finished and had graduation, my fatigue was much worse. It was like, when you get that adrenaline, when you really want to do something, but you don't get the fatigue until afterwards. That's what happened to me. And I decided to defer my place at Edinburgh because I just didn't think I would be up to a full-time accelerated course in a completely new subject, living in a busy city. I decided to move home. And since then, yes, I've had to defer 3 times now. So I have decided that unfortunately I had to kind of lose my place at Edinburgh, which was really heartbreaking because it's something I've worked so hard for.
Yeah.
I'm just not up to it. I'm not up to working. I'm not up to doing anything full time because I have to have a balance in my life to make myself happy. And I live currently by myself, so I manage my flat myself as well, which takes a lot of my energy. And I just don't think until I hopefully come off the treatment that I'll be up to going back to studying. However, I do hope to go back to studying in the future, and I also hope to do a lot of travelling as one of my passions.
Yeah. I'm just thinking back to that doctor saying to you, "Oh, you have a good kind of cancer." Was that what he said? Or one of the better kinds? And I'm just thinking of this like absolutely huge impact on you physically with the pain, with the fatigue, but also what you were expecting, what you were working towards. And also there are long-term effects of the treatment that you're taking. So as you're looking forward now, there's more uncertainty on the horizon.
I've been on treatment for over 2 years now, and I did hit a deep molecular response, which is almost a remission. It's below 0.01%. A lot of people with my cancer do not say remission because almost always there'll be a kind of trace of the leukemia in your blood. However, I have been undetectable, which is amazing. So they found nothing for the last 5 months. And to be considered to even go medication-free, treatment-free, you have to have been on the treatment for 3 years in total and in a deep molecular remission response for 2 years. And I think it's only like 30% of people, this is just an estimate, will ever get to go treatment-free, even considered to go treatment-free as part of a clinical trial. Most people with my cancer have to be on treatment for life at the moment, the way that things are going. And there is a 60% chance of a relapse within the first 6 months to a year when you come off the treatment.
So you're waiting to kind of see what happens going forward, if it's going to be continuous treatment, if you might get times treatment free.
Yeah.
I'd love to bring Maddie into the conversation here. Maddie, how has it been hearing from Amber?
Yeah, really interesting. I think there's like a lot of similarities, also a lot of differences. I mean, I was at uni as well when I was diagnosed, and it also like GPs sort of kind of missed the symptoms and misdiagnosed. It was similarly sort of difficult to get a diagnosis. Things about like unhelpful things that people say when you've got a type of cancer that you can live with for a long time. It makes it really difficult to know how to deal with it.
What are some of the things that you've heard, Maddie?
I've been living with my cancer now for 8 years. So yeah, I've heard everything, everything you could hear, but kind of that you're lucky that you've got a slow growing cancer, but also I think you'll be fine, just because I've had periods where I have been fine, and it kind of makes people think that I'm fine. And my cancer has never gone away. Like, I've never been in remission, and I've still had people go, oh, so you must be in remission then, because I've not been on treatment. The other things are sort of all sorts of tips from people who know nothing know nothing about cancer, all of the sort of, have you tried this or have you tried that? Yeah, I've probably heard it all, to be honest. But that comes with the territory of being quite open about my cancer, and being open on social media and doing like fundraisers and stuff like that. So opening myself up to public and strangers' opinions, but doesn't make it any more helpful.
So many armchair oncologists out there.
Yeah, so many.
Yeah, and that thing of like, I think you'll be fine. It's such a conversation stopper as well. Like, I mean, what do you say to that? That thing of, well, you must be in remission when, like you said, you've never been in remission. It's so many assumptions in there. So, Maddie, can you take me back to when you were diagnosed?
Yeah, so similar to Amber, I was at university, but I was in my first year of university, so I was 18, studying classics at Warwick University. I had a lump on my left shoulder that was being investigated. So when I started at uni, I had this lump. I knew I was going to have to go back to London for more tests and things. It was the kind of thing of dealing with my London GP and trying to change to the GP at Warwick, and the GPs having kind of differing opinions. So when I was diagnosed, I was literally a few months into uni, kind of excited about the fact that I'd left home and had this newfound independence and met all these new people. I was kind of just enjoying nights out, and wasn't taking my studies too seriously at that point. Really just trying to live my best life. And then the diagnosis was a huge shock, because again, like Amber said, I was told that there was nearly 100% sure it wasn't going to be something cancerous, even though all of the tests I was having were showing that the lump was suspicious. So I was kind of sure that it wasn't going to be the case. And then after I had a biopsy, they called me back into the hospital early. And even then, we thought maybe they just wanted to discharge me and get rid of me quicker. Than even then, you kind of think, oh, it won't be. And even in the hospital, there were so many clues that we were about to get bad news, but you still think it won't be, though. And yeah, from the diagnosis, things happened quite quickly, and they were pretty good at that. Like, I think within a week, I was having surgery to remove the lump, and then having investigations to see whether it had spread or not. it was probably like a few weeks later that we actually found out the specific type of cancer that I had, as I was told that I had some kind of soft tissue sarcoma. And when you Google that, you find out that there's loads of subtypes and loads of different types of treatment, and it was basically impossible to get information. And then it transpired that I had an ultra rare type of sarcoma known as alveolar soft part sarcoma. The sort of statistics of how many people get it is just tiny, tiny, tiny. There's like all of the odds were against me in that sense.
So in the UK, do you know roughly how many people would have your kind of cancer?
I believe Sarcoma UK have finally released some stats on this because it's been impossible to find that out. But I think it's 6 people in England every year are diagnosed with it. I've only like a few years ago met someone in person in the UK who has it.
Wow.
And up until then, I was just messaging people from like around the world, with the same cancer. And it was great to finally meet someone a few years later who actually has it.
With having such a rare cancer, what does that mean for your treatment?
So at diagnosis, I was told that traditional chemotherapy is ineffective, which at the time I thought, great, I'm not going to have to lose my hair, not going to have that. And then when I found out that it had spread to my lungs, that meant that there was no approved treatments for my type of cancer in the UK or anywhere in the world. Only like within the last year, there's been a type of treatment approved, I think in America, but still in the UK, there's no approved treatments. So it has meant a lot of like watching and waiting. So the nodules in my lungs are slow growing. And so just kind of as the years go on, watching new treatments become available, having to do a lot of my own research, and me and my family having to do a lot of our own research and getting onto forums. And even though they tell you not to Google your cancer when you've got such a rare cancer that doctors don't know what to do with you, you have to do your own research. You have to kind of get acquainted with medical journals. None of us have a medical background, but we've got well acquainted with those sorts of things and different types of treatments.
So tell me more about watch and wait. So you're literally going for regular scans and waiting for it to get to the point that you can get more medication?
So I've had a few surgeries on a couple surgeries on my shoulder. So they removed the lump. It then spread to the bone a year or so later. So they removed some of the bone in my shoulder. And at that point, we did know it had spread to my lungs, but they basically said that, we want to wait and see kind of how fast it's growing, how it's acting without treatment. And so, every few months I'd have scans, and every few months it'd either be like stable or kind of it's growing, but growing really slowly. And every scan, it was like, you've got 1 or 2 more nodules, but it's still not, we don't want to bring in treatment until we absolutely have to, because essentially once we start systemic treatment, you'll be on it for life, basically. They were able to do an ablation on my right lung, which is like a non-invasive procedure where they like zap the nodule with microwaves. But they can't treat all of the nodules in that way because it'd cause too much damage to the lungs. But it bought some time, more time off treatment. And then, eventually I had a scan where they said that they've kind of got big enough that they would like to start treating them. And I think at every scan I was getting more nodules. So it was at that point, it was in September 2020 that they decided to bring some systemic treatment in.
That waiting, how did your mind cope with that? Because like there's something, it's one thing waiting for a scan knowing that it's going to be like a week, but it's another thing that you're waiting over months and months and that uncertainty, but knowing something is there, knowing that it's growing slowly. So what did you do with your mind during those times that you were waiting? Like, did it have a mental health impact?
I talk a lot about scan anxiety. So I think just leading up to the scans, just everyday anxiety and worry about what might happen. It was really difficult, especially those first few years, because it was completely new. And I feel like the scan anxiety just started way too soon. You'd have the scan and you'd have the results, and whether they were, I'd never describe them as good, because every time it's just you're told that the cancer's still there. I think that was the other thing as well, is I couldn't really deal with good news the way that I feel like I was expected to, because a stable scan just meant that the cancer was still there.
Yeah.
They were never going to tell me that it disappeared. That would have been great news. But I think as the years have gone on, I've been a bit better at not letting it be all consuming, but still leading up to the scans. But it's less like the whole month leading up to the results and more like the week before. But it's kind of, it makes it really hard to focus on anything. It's all you can think about, and you're kind of pre-researching and trying to talk to other people with the same cancer, and seeing I'm just trying to think of all these possible outcomes. It's hard not to let it consume your life.
And so you said in 2020 you went on continuous treatment.
Very similar to Amber, actually. It's a drug called cediranib, so it's like a targeted therapy that my oncologist was able to get on compassionate grounds. So it's been through trials, shown to be effective, but not effective enough to be approved. So it's a drug that they knew about. They knew sort of what side effects to expect. And so, I was lucky to be granted it on compassionate grounds. A pill I take daily with reasonably manageable side effects, but side effects that, it's a toxic drug. So it was just a case of, because it's taken daily, just when side effects would get so severe, I was able to take breaks. We were able to sort of adjust the dosage and stuff to work with my body, because we're not looking for the cancer to disappear. We're just looking to manage it for as long as possible. So started that in September 2020. And now we're at a stage where I need to switch treatments because it's stopped being so effective. But the fact that I've been on it for 3 years means that I had a reasonably good response to it.
So with being on these drugs for a lot longer, I'm thinking about, what Amber was saying in the beginning about those two different types that we think of. We think of really, really harsh, shorter term treatment, but we don't necessarily think of that balancing of work, life, medication, energy levels. For you, that balance is really how to integrate it into your life. Have you found a way through with that?
It's just it's such a challenge. I feel like sometimes I can go through weeks and months feeling like I've got this is fine, and then the toxicity builds up. One of my worst side effects was I would get nausea as well, but I wasn't vomiting, but I was having a lot of diarrhea. And when it was really bad, it was every couple of hours. And still trying to work with that. And that includes through the night. And there were honestly times where I was up in the middle of the night thinking why am I doing this to myself? You just think, is it worth it? Even though you've had those periods of it being fine and pretty much managing fine with the side effects, and still being able to be social and work and exercise and do all the things that I want to do. When you're in those dark moments, it's really hard to pull yourself out of it. And at those points, it's literally only having a little bit of a treatment break that helps, and starting to feel a bit normal again once the drug starts to wear off again. But then you're battling with the anxiety that the cancer could be growing when you're not taking the drugs. So.
Yeah, and I think that is, it's so much to weigh up, and it's something that so many other people that I've heard about with chronic cancers are constantly having to adjust and, you know, thinking about treatment breaks, but then, like you were saying, that anxiety then building up. So it could be a physical thing that's building up as well as a mental thing. I'd love to bring Christopher into the conversation here. How has it been hearing from Amber and Maddie?
Well, thank you for sharing your stories. They're very relatable, even though I was diagnosed significantly older than you two. The whole people diminishing the cancer and it's a good cancer and you look so well, and I think, so relatable. Can
you tell me about what was happening in your life, Christopher? Did you know much about cancer? Was anyone around you ever had cancer? No
experience. I don't think any knowledge of cancer, and absolutely zilch. Just basic, I suppose, a bit like you were sort of saying about how people have that image of cancer. I had the Hollywood vision of cancer that you look like you're dying and you die and that's it.
Right. And so when you were given your diagnosis then, what was that like for you?
You think you're going to die, is your initial thoughts. But then being told that you're going to go and watch and wait is kind of a bit of it does screw with your head a bit, because you have that Hollywood vision of cancer. You assume you're going to have treatment and you're going to try and fight this. But when you're told you're going to do nothing, it's like that's confusing. And it's very confusing for the people around you as well. And which I think is partly why they can belittle the cancer. You're just not sick enough.
And yet it does have an impact on you while you're watching and waiting. Did it have an effect on your daily life, your energy levels?
I was quite lucky with the sort of symptoms, really. The biggest one would have been fatigue and obviously being careful of infections. But apart from that, I kind of had it quite lightly compared to a lot of people. But it was interesting hearing, because you were diagnosed in your 20s. It was funny, when I was diagnosed, I had the symptoms in my 20s, but it was never ever, because it was so borderline. And it's funny because I had one of my most prominent lymph nodes, which I had in my 20s, and that was never sore, and I didn't know why. Funny enough, when I had treatment last year, that's also gone. So that's been there with me all that time. So it must be connected. But I was obviously living with it until it started to escalate in my late 30s, early 40s.
So you're going from scan to scan, and like Maddie was saying, it's like it's still there, like it's not going to go, but there isn't anything to be done. Like, what did you find yourself feeling like you needed to do something?
I came to exercise quite late in life because I'd already started exercising, and that I started to do more. And I started to have acupuncture, and I was seeing a Western herbalist to see if there was things I could do to boost my immune system. So I think I was grabbing at things a little bit as a way of, I suppose, getting a bit of control.
Yeah.
Because you lose so much control. The way I used to sort of put it at the time was, the NHS is there to deal with you and your illness, but they don't really have the time or the resources for the nurture. Whereas these things were time for me, and it gave me that bit of sort of comfort and nurturing that I wasn't getting elsewhere, I think. So I think that's kind of one of the things I did to sort of help myself, in a sense, probably mentally as well.
Because, I mean, that's what all of you have echoed. It's uncertainty, but it's continued uncertainty. It's compounded uncertainty. And so having those spaces to kind of get a feeling of control. And like you said, I love that word, like nurture. Yeah, like having that space for you. But in your mind, you're always somewhat thinking there is going to be a treatment day. That 15 years of your life, knowing that it's coming. When you did get the news that you were going to get treated, where was your mind at that point?
It just sort of happened very suddenly. I just got a call from my GP to say that my numbers in my blood had escalated quite a lot. And after 15 years, I think you partly sort of think, will I get away with this? Maybe I will. So it was still quite jarring when I then went in to see the hematologist, and he said, we need to start treatment, because I still didn't feel any different. I still felt the same. So even though the numbers in my bloods and my spleen and all the factors that indicate you need to start treatment, they weren't impacting on my life. So it was a bit kind of like, oh, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
And the monitoring of me had dropped to yearly. So again, it gave me a false sense of confidence that maybe things were fine. Ironically, then a year later, it just escalated, and you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have been left.
Can really hear that kind of like, oh, maybe I'm getting away with it, you know. And actually, when you do need the treatment, it doesn't matter how long you've had to kind of think about it. Like you were saying, it's still jarring to get that news. And so when did you start your treatment?
So I started treatment in January last year, February, and finished January this year. So it was a combination of same targeted therapies. One was an intravenous treatment for 6 months, and then it was tablets for the remaining 6 months. So that's finished. And I'm now waiting to be seen again.
Okay. And can you tell me about your first time in an MRI machine?
So, yeah, because all my scans had been CT scans. So I'd never had an MRI. And just towards the end of treatment, something was showing up in my blood. So basically they're having to rule out whether I have another type of cancer. The trouble with the leukemia I have, I'm not sure if it's the same for the others. You're susceptible to other cancers. And it's partly because of the immune system and partly because of treatments affecting the immune system. I think generally I'm quite a strong person, and that's how I've got through things. I'm very sort of stoic in my own way. But I had the MRI and I did lose my shit. I just that was just like, whoa. Okay. But I think it's because it's quite overwhelming having a year of treatment, then being told you may have another cancer. But the staff were amazing. They inserted a little mirror so I could look down and see my feet and look out. And I pushed the panic button, and one of the guys came in and he was rubbing my arm.
Oh.
So they were really, really sweet. And I was like, I'm not normally like this. I said, I think it's because it's just too much. I said, I'm normally fine in these situations. But they were really good. Yeah. But yeah, I'm not always strong.
Well, I think that's the thing, that stoicism, that getting through it, like that living with it all that time, going through the treatment. But then yet, like all of us, kind of there is that wall that can come at any point.
Yeah.
And something new about like, oh, another kind of cancer, another kind of scan, having a panic attack in an MRI machine, that is not the place you want to be.
No.
Oh, thank you, Christopher, so much for sharing that.
Cool.
I wanted to ask this question of all of you. If you could whisper a bit of advice back to yourself, sort of, maybe a few months after you were diagnosed, what advice would you give yourself?
I think I would tell myself this isn't it. Don't put your life on hold. And if I can have two pieces.
Yeah.
The other thing I think is lower your expectations of others.
Oh.
I think that's, a big one.
Yeah, kind of going back to that thing of not only are you dealing with everything that you're dealing with, but you're dealing with other people's projections and assumptions and, sometimes dismissals. Thank you for sharing that, Christopher. That was a great bit of advice to kind of... Because it is a bit of a shock when people do and say those things, isn't it?
One person did actually, you don't really have cancer. It's like, well,
yeah. And I imagine they have no medical training.
Oh, no.
Oh. And Maddie, what would be your bit of advice that you'd whisper to yourself?
If I look back at myself as a 18-year-old, I think most people would have advice to give their 18-year-old self. The main thing for me at that time was to know that it was okay to be scared, and that it was okay if the cancer was going to change me, and it's okay to tell people that I'm scared as well. I was terrified of upsetting my family and letting them know how terrified I was. It took me ages to be able to speak to people about it, because I so just wanted to like pretend it wasn't happening and get on as normal. And I had people telling me to just stay positive and to not let it change me. And it's so funny because we all change so much when we're that age anyway. So yeah, I would say it's okay to be scared. And also you're a lot more adaptable and stronger than you think you are.
Yeah, because kind of plowing through and trying to make everything normal, there can be so much energy going into that. And when you've got fatigue and actually other people aren't putting themselves under that level of pressure, you know, it's about kind of like, where can you kind of relieve that cognitive load? Like you've already got too much, letting a little bit of that go and admitting, it's scary.
I learned that eventually, and as soon as I did, it started to feel so much better. And even though it's still horrible at times, it's like the fact that I can now just be open about it and share that, and like know that whatever I'm feeling is normal and fine. I'm now like, such a weight off.
Yeah.
So I just wish I'd learnt that sooner. Accepted that sooner.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Maddie. And Amber, what would yours be?
So I would tell myself that this is going to be one of the most difficult journeys of your life. There are going to be a lot of challenges, but also you're going to come out of this or continue this journey to become a better person and to have a much greater and deeper kind of understanding and appreciation for life. I now live my life with this great appreciation for the day-to-day things that before you kind of overlook. And I've met the most extraordinary people on some of my young person's cancer trips, and I've had amazing opportunities. And so many people that I've spoken to have said, like, although the cancer it's been such a difficult and challenging experience, that they actually wouldn't change it because of who they've become as a person. And similarly to Maddie, like it kind of shows you how strong you are, and how just really proud of who you are and who you've become and what you've come through.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you to all three of you. And I know those bits of advice, you whispered a bit back to yourself, but I know so many people listening, that's going to resonate with them. And, you know, it is about having a space to hear from other people, isn't it? Because actually, when your cancer is quite rare, when you're not around lots of other younger people, and you know, it is a different kind of cancer in terms of the duration of treatment, the duration of waiting. It can be quite isolating. And so, you know, at Shine Cancer Support, there is a chronic cancer meetup just for people with chronic cancer to get together once a month online, have a chat and have that space. Head over to shinecancersupport.org or find us on Instagram or Facebook or whatever you're using, or TikTok. Send us a message. We've got lots of support specifically for chronic cancer. But right now, I would love to say thank you and bye to Christopher, Maddie and Amber. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you to the always awesome Radio Facilities for sponsoring our podcast, and to all of you listening. Till next time.
Not your grandma's cancer show.